use they them pronouns, and I'm the game jam coordinator for Extra Credits. And we have with us here today some wonderful guests. Will, did you introduce yourself yet?
No, hi, I'm Will. I
Yes.
use he, him pronouns. I'm the stream overlord here at Extra Credits. I'm the one that fixes all of the problems that we have with our stream and sometimes makes more problems that we have with our stream. So yeah, that's me.
So we have here with us Chris, Sam, and Josh, who are people who work in the industry and have design experience. So if you have questions for them, we'll be answering a few questions in chat or we'll be answering some questions from a chat regarding game design or the industry or whatever. And I want each of you to introduce yourselves and kind of talk about what you're doing. Let's start with Josh.
Cool, awesome. So hello, my name is Josh Delson. I go by he, him from the Chicagoland area. What I do at the moment is I am a college professor in the Midwest. I also work on an independent project or an alternative controller game that was done during the first Extra Credits Jam. I got like the T-shirt as well, which is the coolest shirt. Yes.
T-shirt represent.
T-shirt plug,
T-shirt team.
But,
it's extra funny because that green screen is chroma key green, so you just held up the shirt and you just like you have like a hole into the abyss through your shirts,
like an abyss.
which is it's just the best.
It's why I couldn't wear my shirt today.
Can't let the abyss out.
But what I do industry-wise, I work for Electronic Arts as a operations specialist at the moment. I do remote work for them, which is cool. I'm a professor. I'm working on a alternative controller game. It's called Overtime, which was done during the first Extra Credits Jam. It's basically like a WarioWare basketball visual novel like experience where you use a basketball toy, like literally something you could buy for $8 on Amazon as your controller. So there's that as well. Some other things I do on the side is I also am the program director of the National Student Leadership Conference, and we help incoming undergraduates learn if they want to pursue game development as a degree, which is really cool. But that's a little bit about me. That's what I do. Then I just do like random like AR mobile stuff for fun because I love AR core at the moment. I just think it's really fun and accessible. But that's me.
Yeah, Josh, didn't you also submit an AR game in the last jam for the present jam?
Yes, I did. It was called Oasis with 2 O's. It's basically it's a planting AR experience where basically there's just seeds all over the place. You water it, then you it's like a random loot box kind of thing, so you don't know what comes out. It could be like a carrot, or it could be a car, or it could be a business person trying to sell you something, and it's just like this fun thing of you walking around the floor and just popping seeds everywhere. But yeah, so I've done the last 2 game jams. I'll be here for the 3rd one as well. And yes, the T-shirts. That's
Sam, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Hi, I'm Sam's he, him. I graduated from DigiPen, so I met James there. He was one of my professors, and I've done a lot of stuff. I'm in Seattle. I've done a lot, just various companies, and I most recently have been at the University of Washington as like designer in residence kind of thing. I worked a lot with the atmospheric science department, doing a bunch of games about climate change, and some stuff with the civil engineering guys, and I'll be doing some stuff with Extra Credits in the future as well.
Yay! That sounds exciting.
Ooh,
I want to see
exciting.
what you're gonna make for us.
I don't think I'm allowed to say yet.
That's okay.
And literally yesterday I was talking to James and he was like, "Hey, do you want to help out with the Extra Credits game jam tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure."
The origin story.
I'm usually sleeping right now. It's 11 in the morning for me, and I don't wake up until about noon.
Yeah, same. It's really hard for me to actually be awake right now, but I know we have to do this for the greater good, so
yes.
It's a sacrifice. Chris, how about you tell us about yourself? And some of you probably recognize Chris, who did the stream with me last time for the present jam.
Holiday.
Yeah, the holiday one.
Holiday jam thing. Yeah, that was awesome. So I'm Chris DeLeon. I go by he, him. I'm based in Los Angeles. My background's scattered. Been making games kind of as a hobbyist since like 1997. Had some professional experience in AAA, startup scene, indie mobile, web casual, etc. Taught in university a little bit. These days I run Gamketo Club. which is an online worldwide practice group where people build games together for practice. And if they have questions, they schedule time with me or one of our art trainers, level design trainers, sound trainers, etc., to help troubleshoot the problems in the context of like these freeware practice games we build. But that's been going on now for years. We've got about 65 games out there, including 2 or 3 from like the past few weeks, another one releasing in a couple more weeks, and several in tandem being developed. And real proud of the work that we do in that group. We have guest speakers come in and we release this podcast and stuff. And then a couple years ago, I wrote maybe a half dozen or 4 or 5 episodes of extra credits stuff. So that was some of my first intersection to this community.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're basically basically if anyone has questions in chat for any of these people, we will try to get through some of them. Otherwise, I wanted to let's see, Chris. I know that we I remember seeing on my itch.io notifications kind of recently that Gamketo Club had put out like a couple of like games. Like, what does that mean exactly? Because I know it's not just like one person making these games. And
yeah, sure. Yeah, so the general structure. So the 2 recent games were Flail the Nordic Tentacle and Warped Radar. And both of them were a little bit unusual for us in that a lot of our games tend to be a little more actiony arcadey because those kind of games are very modular. These are both much more like Flail the Nordic Tentacle is kind of a slightly RPG action inspired by games like Ys or YS for those who see it written. And then on the side of Warped Radar, it was kind of like an adventure detective, dialogue-driven walk around a cyberpunk city. Both those games had dozens of collaborators from around the world chipping in. All of our projects, we don't really form teams so much as really the community shares the project. And so every single week, people shift between teams as to like, well, I did some level design last week on this team. Next week, I'm going to do some writing on that project. And that's
how do you like manage that and like not have like wildly like inconsistent work? Like
sure. So because we've released every single game on deadline, notwithstanding one like family emergency situation, which we're still just a club, not commercial, so no pressure on those kind of situations. But so the way we do that is when projects being prepared, and we've been doing this now since I started my first club in 2004. We plan out a tentative schedule of kind of minimum viable product plans from the outset. So we already have from the beginning an idea of basically what are the apples on the task tree each week to make sure something gets caught or accounted for. Those are adaptive schedules. So every single week throughout production until release, we're kind of adapting. Okay, if we're moving a card forward because it didn't get done, what else are we knocking off the table to make room for it? Because we're not magically going to have more time next week than we did this week, or just scrapping it. And it's easier to make those kind of adaptive scope changes gradually 1 week over time over a 5-month schedule than letting them pile up at the end and being like, oh gosh, when's it all going to happen? And so that's part we try to train people in this sort of this adaptive, flexible strategy of the game that gets produced, and I think we see this oftentimes in jams, may not be exactly the one we had initially in mind, but that the goal isn't necessarily like, I'm not being assessed by, I planned to do A, did I produce exactly A? My goal was to make something interesting and worthwhile, and as long as I did that, then the initial vision helped give us the momentum, the direction to do that. I think my computer just there we go. My screen went to sleep for a second. But anyway, so that's kind of our process. And every single week, our leads report updates. We keep our credits all super specific because people drift projects. The collaboration amounts are uneven, and that's expected. But we find that's really helpful to be in our credits real clear about exactly which models, exactly which features, that kind of stuff is kind of a hard part of how we do things in Gamketo.
Cool. We got a question from chat, which I'm going to just open to anyone who wants to answer this. What do you recommend for people who want to make a living from games for a high schooler? Like if you're talking to a high schooler, I believe that's the correct interpretation of the question. Yes, basically, how do you get into living making games when you're starting out in high school?
So the most important thing that I found is just you got to find where the people are. And you gotta make connections, really. Like, I went to DigiPen, which is like a really, well-known game school. But the piece of paper, the diploma itself, it doesn't really help you that much. But all of the people that you meet there are what really make the difference.
And I think it also depends a lot on like for me, I guess, like I did like kind of want to do AAA stuff, but honestly, like I'm kind of more into like indie stuff, and I kind of have been more into indie stuff even like since high school. Like, and I went to a liberal arts school. I actually went to I actually went to Brigham Young University because I grew up Mormon. And I went there, and they don't have a game design like degree or like major there or anything like that, but like I got to work on some really cool games like at BYU because I just happened to find all of like the nerdy people who are like really into game design. And because of the environment and also just like the size of the school, I kind of got to meet people from a lot of different like disciplines, and so I was able to meet people who like would never like work in games like typically, but like were like in games because of this one project we were all doing together. And so that was really cool because I felt like I got to learn from a lot of different people, and not like just like, oh, these are all like nerds or whatever. Like some of them like are not like obvious nerds, but like we all like we all wanted to like create a cool thing together. So that's totally valuable experience. Yeah, definitely like what Sam said about just meeting people and being around people who like enjoy creating things.
So
Well, and also the thing about the game industry now is it's so open that like it's easier than it's ever been to get into the industry. Like anyone can make a game on the App Store on iOS or Android or Steam or whatever. And once you put a game up, you can say you're a game developer. It's not like you have to have some certificate or anything. It's just becoming harder and harder to actually make a living at it.
It's a question that we get a lot on the channel here because I stream 40-ish hours a week, and people come by and they're like, hey, you're extra credits, I want to get into game design, how do I do that? And the piece of advice that I always give people, because I'm not a game designer, right, not in the computer sense, I'm working on some tabletop stuff, but that's kind of apples and oranges, is do the thing, right? Like, because of exactly what you're talking about, because we're in an era where accessibility to game design tools is higher than I think it's been before, probably ever. It's possible to just go out and do the thing and see if you like it, and then find other people who want to do the thing too, and then work on that thing together. And that seems like a good way to get a foothold, at least to me.
Well, and you don't have to get hired at like EA or anything anymore. Like it used to be the only way was you'd have to find some big publisher and you'd have to make a deal, but now you can put a game on the App Store. Like anyone can do it.
Look at Flappy Bird. Right?
Yeah. I tend to become concerned about Flappy Bird as a very isolated example out of hundreds of thousands of things. That
for sure. But it is a way to encourage people to try the thing, even and you just have to temper their expectations, right?
Yeah, and I think that expectations thing is partly a matter of helping people figure out what they want out of it, and this is an enormous factor because oftentimes what someone really wants is they want to build their game idea. And one of the things that some people find, and some people go to a school for games degrees, build connections, go to expensive conferences, land that job they thought they wanted at a company, and then realize like, oh, games at this scale are like building an aircraft carrier where there's like 300 of us, and we each get to be top of the world at a very, very narrow specialization, which, like, nothing but respect for that. But it might not be what someone really wants. If they really want to, like, have freedom and flexibility to just kind of mess around and creatively do things their way, in those cases, I've actually seen lots of cases where folks are kind of equally happy finding some way to apply their primary core skill sets to some other line of related adjacent work, freelance web design, day job at a software engineering role, etc. And then on the side, kind of like, they play in a band at bars on weekends or something, just have this thing that they do, gives them a next level of kind of personal ownership in their projects in a way that, again, it's a trade-off. Obviously, those don't hit the same level of visibility and expectations of like, oh my goodness, you worked on Call of Duty, which again, like, no disrespect to those people, but for some people, what they really want out of it is they just want to be able to creatively jam on their thing, and that's where taking part in a game jam, you're already doing it.
Yeah.
So good on y'all for being here.
Yeah, I actually did a game jam once at the University of Washington, and the game that we made, we submitted it for a grant later, and got the grant. So don't let nobody tell you that the game jam can't turn into anything else.
One of my favorite examples of that is the award-winning, much beloved internet sensation Hollow Knight. Started out as a game jam game, right?
So did Super Hot.
Yeah, Super
Oh, yeah,
Hot
so
did
it's
too.
Super Hot as well.
Super hot.
That's a
Super
great
hot.
example. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, Thomas Was Alone was mentioned in chat as an example of a game jam game as well.
Was
Yeah,
it really?
It's a
Oh my
pretty,
gosh.
that's a pretty iconic, yeah.
That's a great game.
And Nuclear Throne, which is also a well-known indie
Primo game.
So.
And I'm glad these are coming up also because a major part of common thread among my peers and my own commercial successful projects, etc., have been, whether or not in a jam context or otherwise, doing small experimental stuff to figure out and feel out what's worth moving forward on.
Mhm.
Occasionally, the problem we found people on is they get lost down this rabbit hole of kind of like self-assigned commitment that no one outside them really forced on themselves, but like, oh, I've been on this project for 3 years, and they weren't really choosy about which project they dedicated 3 years of their life to. If instead they can do some jams, make some small games, produce some student content, put it out there, and then gauge responses, what's getting plays, what's getting discussed, what really felt like the team was working, and then build on that, that's got a way better shot at having already kind of proven its traction and moving forward on those projects than kind of like, okay, my first idea that I've been kind of thinking about for a long time, as soon as it kind of comes to fruition, it's kind of one of these like plans don't survive battle kind of things. Often it doesn't hold water as well as this other random one-off, had a weekend to try to thing. Oh my gosh, people love it.
That's what I tell people, especially like young designers and stuff. It's like what's your like dream game? That like the game you grew up wanting to make, and then just make that first, and then you realize it's not really as good as you thought, and then you can get to the stuff that's actually good.
You have already conquered the mountain of your childhood. You can do something better.
Yeah.
Right.
We've occasionally, at least in my private training and stuff, tends to be an issue of no matter what someone's first thing is, right? They're polluting it with beginner errors. That just pure, never hit this challenge before. And so the thing we'll often do is if it's going to be of personal importance to them to not screw it up and be embarrassed at like, oh, this reeks, I'm ashamed. We'll kind of build some milestones to be like, okay, well, if it's going to involve pathfinding, let's do a smaller game that uses pathfinding first. If it's going to involve animated characters, let's do a smaller thing that does it first. 29 minutes. So by the time they do it in a thing that matters to them, commercially, personally, or otherwise, it's their second, third draft where they can build on the stuff that made them wince the last time they did it. But that said, too, there's no one right path into it. All these different ways, everyone in industry you meet at GDC or otherwise got into it a different way, doing different stuff. And so that's one of the great things about it is that there's so many different, equally valid, interesting ways that people can kind of proceed through their careers and opportunities and creative exploration being game maker.
Oh yeah.
I saw another question in chat that I wanted to make sure did not get lost, which was
thank you.
Someone wanted to know, do game devs necessarily need a publisher, or can they play that role themselves? And I think we've kind of touched on that, but I think it might be useful for some of the people who are more on the novice end of this to go into what your all opinions of that relationship is. Is that really something that's super necessary as you get bigger, or is that something that you think we're going to do away with eventually and everyone's going to self-publish? Or
I think it depends on which. It depends on like which platform you release it on. So an example is the last game jam I worked on an augmented reality game. And fun fact, you could pay Google $24 to publish your game on the App Store, and that's literally it. So that's what me and my group did. We split the money and we published it. But then it also depends if you're actually trying to pursue like an actual larger project, like Hollow Knight specifically. I think that completes does like a little different than like just a little title as well. I don't know if Chris or Sam has comments about that. So.
Yeah, so I've self-published iPhone games and I've worked with publishers on iPhone games. My games that went through publishers were like top 2 paid in the world. My games I self-published, 5-6 digit downloads, which like not terrible, nowhere near the same level of like I didn't have a friend who was on the board of Apple to discuss featuring stuff. The way that publishers is part of what they do is they're out there beating that drum, and some of it really comes from it's partially it's about the creative support, but it's also just as much about all the other parts of business. Where we look at a game studio, we know we have some idea what the engineers do and the sound people do and the art people do. There's always this whole other floor of human beings in suits that are doing some sort of business stuff, and that's the distribution, that's the relationships to visibility channels, that's the knowledge of metrics and the ideas about how to target advertisements, etc., in a way that really help them reach a bigger audience. And so I might suggest it's actually the relationship often plays out a bit like we were just discussing of small prototypes. Really, I think self-publishing anymore is often kind of a nice way to first put kind of the fishing line in the water. If and when it's really starting to like, hey, people love this, it's getting talked about at GDC, it's getting featured in Indicate or experimental gameplay or whatever, that's where it's easier to get a publisher's attention by wagging the ticket of like, hey, I was a nominee or finalist in X, Y, or Z, and you've got a much better negotiating position than like, hey, we've got this prototype, will you look at it? Is a much harder argument to have these days because there are so many volume high volume titles coming out from people largely kind of self-fueling or moonlighting on at least their initial iteration of it.
I've seen projects that I've worked on. I've seen them that having a publisher totally ruined it, and I've also seen not having a publisher completely ruined it. So, I mean, the idea that publishers are going to go completely away because like we have Kickstarter or whatever, I don't think that's true. But I also there's now an opportunity that you don't necessarily need a publisher. Like to get on the App Store, you don't need to have someone publishing it. But if you really want to like get the visibility that a publisher gets, I mean, you can't do that yourself. Like in a day, it takes a long time to really build up your brand. So publishers just helps you out. But another thing too that people don't really, they kind of underestimate a publisher is that they keep the development on track. Like, I mean, we all hate the publisher mandates and stuff, but like if you look at some of the high profile Kickstarter failures that happened because it was the devs and they had no one to really check their ambitions.
No parental supervision.
Yeah, and they ended up just wasting all the money. It's like, well, you're kind of like the whole point was free from publishers, and you kind of made the publisher's case for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So one of my buddies out here, Casper Gray, co-runs Arsenal Agencies, The Unfriendly Ghost, and he's like former Eidos level publisher, now advises indies on publisher relationships. And some of the points he makes are that like, publishers aren't like just all the same. Some very much specialize, and they know strategy gamers, they know mobile games, they know web games, whatever it is. And so again, it might not be it might be an apples and oranges comparison of am I shopping my thing to the right people to connect with them rather than am I on good enough linear scale, because that's not really how it works. But it's also this thing about the I'm glad you brought that up, of like the publisher can play a really valuable role of feedback in a way that unfortunately one of the downsides of disconnecting, whether self-publishing or going through crowdfunding, is part of what they bring is this established industry knowledge. A lot of them are either ex-developers or they've certainly seen enough of the business to have a pretty grounded sense of reality in a way that you like. It's like just like a startup getting money from an investor. Partly they're getting money to get advice. And if you're getting that money through some other mechanism, the advice might be coming from people who are in no position really to make informed calls about priorities of production or difficult realities about trade-offs of marketing expenditures. But like I say, kind of same deal of a startup investor model. It depends on what level you're swinging for. There are projects that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing alone. And even if you had that money sitting in your bank, it shouldn't be your money you're spending as a business. There are different ways to structure those arrangements to be able to make that case, raise that capital, use it in certain ways to make businesses operate at that scale. It's not like someone is just sitting on that and just spins it and is like, and now we're doing great. That's where publishers exist, partly to help manage that layer of financial difficulty and responsibility and regulation.
But for anyone who's just starting out, I wouldn't even really concern yourself with publishing right now. Like, if you manage to put some stuff out yourself and it gets a lot of traction, that's when you can start thinking about like, maybe I should get a publisher.
Yeah, one of our comparable stories, we had a student project that wasn't on the first one, Vision Web Proxy. It got featured at Indiecade E3 and then kind of didn't go anywhere after that. We made a sequel to it that got 7 million plays on the internet. It was a free game, but by the time we made a sequel to that, we had businesses approaching us to try to license it, port it, do business deals, etc., because we could prove like this had legs on it, and we were able to pull it off.
I did see a question in chat, like way a little bit ago, asking if we, as an extra credits people, presumably are going to be at GDC. I know Josh will be at GDC. Chris or Sam, are either of you going to GDC?
I'll be at GDC.
Not.
Okay.
Not me. I haven't been to GDC in a long time, but maybe next year. But I didn't plan for it.
And Chris, you will be at GDC?
I will be, yes.
Okay. I am also going to be there because I'm going to be a conference associate again. And I just wanted to point, so extra credits officially is not at GDC, but like a couple of EC people will just be there, just doing our own business. Like I'm a conference associate for the week, which just means that I'm one of the volunteers who kind of runs like the show floor and everything like that. I might be doing a mini game actually with our Twitter followers when I'm at GDC, because I have a bunch of these jammer stickers that I just printed out a couple weeks ago. And so if you find me wearing the game plush on my head or attached to my backpack or something, then you can come get a sticker from me. And these stickers will also be at Josh's booth for the overtime game in All Control GDC.
That's awesome.
So that's the answer to that question. We have these little stickers, and if you're not going to be at GDC, don't worry about it, because I'm actually planning on maybe making a nicer version of these to kind of sell like online for like $1 or $2. So,
That's awesome.
I was gonna say, like, well, I'm going to GDC now.
Most expensive sticker ever.
All in it for the stickers.
I mean, well, there's a sticker. I'm gonna walk.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was gonna be stickers.
It's a game changer.
Did you
we
need a
had
press pass to get a sticker or something like that?
What you do is you find someone with a press pass and you just convince them to give it to you, and then you get this.
Then you get the sticker.
yeah,
Networking.
it's good. Yeah,
Making
there you
friends.
go. You got it. I saw a really interesting question in chat, which was, do you all have any recommendations for beginner resources for doing solo or small team game jam kind of stuff? I saw people talking about languages. I saw people talking about like Udemy and Linda and other sites like that, whether it's a programming language or a book or an article or a piece of game design. If you could like crystallize like the one thing that you think that every game jammer needs this weekend, what would it be?
So,
Besides sleep and a lot of caffeine.
Yeah,
Like,
sleep
because
and
those are
caffeine
those
rest,
are
I think,
duh.
For me, actually, so fun fact about me is my high school actually made a video game course after me when I was there. And the reason why is because I made games in Adobe Flash Professional, which is Adobe Animate now. So my number one tip is to use Google for like as much as possible, because if you're struggling with a line of code or if you're trying to find some arts, Google usually has an answer. Like there's the Unity forums, which is amazing. There's tutorial videos all over YouTube now, which is amazing as well. Versus back then when I was trying to learn how to make mini games, I literally had to go to like some random blog sites that were outdated, basically script wise. So Google is my number one answer. That's my tip.
Cool.
I will. Oh, go ahead, Sammy.
So it kind of depends on what the game is you want to make. Like, so the first thing you should do is figure out who are your people and what are they all good at, and then that kind of that's how you decide like what you should focus on. Like if you've got a team of a bunch of guys that are writers and you don't have any programmers, don't download Unreal. You can find,
Pro tip. Good.
That's
Writing this down. Nick's Unreal download. Good. Right.
Everyone, raise your hand if you're going to make an MMO, and then leave.
There's the door.
Unless you have like 5 guys who are like MMO experts, that's fine. But I don't want to say like don't do the thing you want to do, but you do kind of have to figure out what your resources are first.
Yeah. Oh. Hang tight, y'all. It's this one's actually on me. This one's Discord being weird. All right. Hang tight, y'all.
Because you could make a pen and paper game.
Okay.
Okay.
Time out. Sam, can you go back to this to right after everyone who's going to make an MMO leave? Because my
What do
Discord
we do
connection.
for making an MMO?
No, that's
Right,
I'm done.
you leave. Okay, cool. Because my Discord connection knocked out for a second, and we lost part of that, and it was really good. I know it was really good because I saw the look in your eyes of like, I have advice I wish to impart to the masses, and then I lost it. And I was like,
make an MMO, and then it
no.
cut off, and we're like, then what?
Because we all
What do we do with
realize
our
we're all
MMO we
making
made?
MMO, and we all have to leave now. Basically, what I was saying is, it's all about figuring out. It's not like, like we're gonna make the most amazing game ever. It's like, what are all we able to do, and figure out what you guys are good at. Like if you're all good at writing, something like Twine's probably going to serve you better than Unreal or Unity. Or if you're all programmers, then you could do something a little more complex. If you're all artists, you probably want to do something that also doesn't require a lot of programming. But you don't need to there's not like one solution for every single team and every single game.
Yeah.
So the advice of what you should look for is kind of a case-by-case thing once you've settled on your team and figured out what your competencies are.
Right.
I
So
also wanted to kind of mention just briefly, like along those lines, it's totally because like someone had mentioned in chat that they had an experience in which like most of the people there were like good at like writing like the lore and whatnot, and there was only like one like programmer on that team. And just because like there are situations like that, like it's also okay to be like, hey, let's make like a tabletop RPG or a board game instead, because you can actually submit that on itch.io. Like you can like upload that as like an itch.io game. So like that's also always an option if like the technical tools are just not going to do well for your team.
Right,
What
and-
I'll suggest, and I mean, so this might not, it may or may not be game jam scale. This might be more of the longer term thing. In my mind, often jams are either a chance to try pivoting something lateral, like I'm already comfortable in this engine, maybe I'll try this other platform just for the weekend. But otherwise, if it's a longer term base skill, like, oh, I've never coded before, then I might learn that before the next jam and then exercise that skill there. But our intro path is my free Udemy course is called codeyourfirstgame.com. It uses JavaScript, but importantly, it's not there to teach JavaScript. We pick because I've used 6 different programming languages professionally. I teach a subset of JavaScript that overlaps other languages, because no matter what you're in, you're going to have functions, variables, loops, conditionals, just these very fundamental elements of programming that come up, like spatial coordinates, update tick, no matter what platform you're in. And so it's kind of a generic foundation under the assumption that you probably will jump over from there to Unity, C#, or making something in C++ with SFML or something else, Pygame in the future. And so it's really just a very bare bones intro. And then methodology-wise, including just kind of for scoping for a weekend, I've always taught sort of the historical progression, make kind of a mid-'70s game before a late '70s game, before an early '80s game, before a mid-'80s game. And it's just this kind of nice constraint on the level of fidelity of expectations, of scope, which used to be constrained because the processor was garbage, the RAM was non-existent, the storage wasn't there, the team size was 2 because of the size of the industry. And it's just sort of a nice, safer way to kind of build your way up to it, where even sometimes people will look at it and be like, oh, a Super Nintendo or N64 game, isn't that retro enough? And it's like, those still, to execute well, are a pretty formidable challenge for experienced people. So I find it's a useful kind of historical gating thing to look back at, okay, well, could I really knock out of the park an Atari 2600 grade game, plus or minus, obviously, take some liberties on artistic representation and so on, just to help getting focused first on, can I get some text on the screen? Can I get mechanics working? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One thing, though, I would say, like, as a very general thing, if you don't know anything about programming at all, or you're not particularly computer savvy, make a pen and paper game. If you're kind of like just a very, very beginner at kind of programming and stuff, it's Twine. And then if you're kind of at like midway pretty good and you want to make a computer thing, Unity is a pretty good place to go.
Yeah. I think
Like for what it's like, I'm a big like Twine person myself, but that's like more reflective of just like I can't really do a lot of programming, but like I've seen some like amazing stuff made in Twine, like some really technically like amazing stuff in Twine.
And it sounds like a rephrase of like kind of the general theme that I'm hearing here is, in a game jam, you get to pick your own bar. So pick the bar that you're going to knock it out of the park on, right? Don't try and, like, you can push yourself for sure, but push yourself in a lane that you're comfortable with and know what your strengths are, right? You don't have to do what everyone else is doing, right? There's a theme and that's it. We're like, It needs to be a game. It needs to be about this theme. It needs to be done at this time. Go play. Go.
The danger is always in overscoping, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a 4-day game jam, I would say pick a game that only takes, like, scope a game that takes a day, and then you might get it done in 4 days. But if you scope a game that takes 4 days,
there's no way
you're not going to get it done.
Right.
Yeah, and an important part of the time constraint is to be able to take some pressure off of it. That's why I think some people they get too much into feeling either pressure of competition or like they're going to be judged by it, etc. And I really would encourage people to feel like it's a safe area to play, make some mistakes. Worst case scenario, it was a few days of your life. Right after that are a few other days if you want to try again and do something different. A lot of my prior experience, I did a bunch of experimental gameplay development back in 07, 08, was basically jamming outside of game jams, realizing like, hey, if it takes me 1 to 3 days to do something, I don't have to wait until someone else gives me a theme or sets aside a block of time on a calendar. I can just do that, which is like really kind of freeing to take this pressure off. Like, oh, this comes around once or twice a year. you can kind of do it when you want to,
Yeah.
once you're comfortable in that scale.
You can make a 1 day game, right? If you make a 1 day game and it takes 1 day, then you have 3 days to make that 1 day game better. But if you pick a 4 day game and it takes you 5 days, then you don't have a game at the end of 4 days.
It's also, even at the at our club scale, we see this where sometimes people will pick like a 6-month game and try to do it in 3, and some people will pick like a 1-month game and try to do it in 3, and the 1-month game done in 3 way more polished and nice. The other one's kind of barely strings held together, pulled across the finish line with nuts and bolts falling out of it.
And you have no idea how often that happens in the game industry.
Oh yeah. So a team with $500 million wishes they had $550 million. Yeah.
I'm trying to look.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there's at Indiecade this year. There was what's that activity, the Flash Jam that y'all do?
Yep.
That I really
Yeah.
like. That's
Ted-
a really
Ted
cool
runs
example. Yeah, they spend like half an hour just like rapidly prototyping something. Then in the end, they just play it, which is a cool way just to scope themselves.
Yeah. Well, and actually, and I'm glad you mentioned Flash Jam stuff. So, because like what I did for my experimental gameplay prototyping stuff, I see we have 10 minutes. Yay! Was I was doing nightly prototypes, and that was part of what freed me. So some of my more viral videos on YouTube are me speed coding to basically accepting like I'm not going to maintain this code base. I'm not going to build off this. I don't care about elegance. I don't care about readability. I don't care about anything besides can I get the thing on the screen working? And then if this is worth doing, this is actually part of the Cerny method that Mark Cerny, famous from both Marble Madness and like Sony PlayStation, kind of teaches, which is that like if it's worth rebuilding from the prototype, you're basically going to start clean with like better technology, better platform, better planning, better organization. But for the prototype, just thrash the heck out of it. It's a throwawayable thing. Don't get too caught up in like, oh, am I using the proper structures? Is this as optimized as it can be? Optimize your time as a human being, and then later decide if it's worth like a rewrite or an optimization of what this thing is you pulled off.
Because the thing is not the end goal necessarily with the prototype. The idea is the end goal, right? Like the form of the thing and the knowledge that you have gained about how you made that thing. And your second try will always be better. No one,
absolutely,
like no one does that thing where they're like, "Behold, I have birthed from my head as Athena, a goddess of a game. It's the goddess of wisdom game. It's just there. I have done it." No one does that.
Every now and then you'll read an interview with like a studio lead who will say that, and then if you talk to people who worked at the studio, they're like, "Oh, they're lying. That's not."
That's not how that. No.
It's and part of why also I find it again, I'm a technical game designer, kind of speed prototyper by trade. Part of why I like throwaway code is that it takes the pressure off. I'm not worried about like, oh, I can't cut that part off. I spent so much time on it. I really care about it. It's easier to kind of hack off entire limbs of it if you're like, this turned out to be garbage, that turned out to be garbage. And even when I was at EA as a tech game designer, we'd basically prototype features that way in Unreal and then play it on system and be like, this isn't worth doing. Cut it out and spent like a day on it instead of 3 weeks doing kind of a proper engineering cycle around how to best integrate it with every other system in the architecture.
Yeah, it sounds like sunk time fallacy is a thing that game designers have to be very, very cognizant of all of the time, right? Just because you spent time on it does not mean it's good or worth anything.
Yeah, and
if it's not those things, chuck it. Right, yeah.
Once you can learn to love cutting stuff, it makes everything way easier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Yeah, one way to look like a magician is if you only ever show. I think we had a marketing guy who used to explain like Nintendo would actually only surface maybe 1 in 5 projects they'd kind of started internally, and like the others never even get a peep to the world. And it's like, oh, if you just discard your 80% of your worst work, you look really talented because the world only sees your best 20%. No matter how good it is or isn't, it's better than what everyone else is putting out there on average.
Well, I mean, recently, Metroid Prime 4 is a great example of that, right? They spent 3 years with a whole team working on Metroid Prime 4 before Nintendo said, we cannot do this. We are literally scrapping 3 years of development and shipping it back to the people that made the original Prime. And if Nintendo can do that with 3 years of work, you can do it with something that took you an afternoon. You can be like, this is crap. It's fine.
The one asterisk I will put by this is that there is certain types of experience. One of the things I do like about jams that comes from the finishing act. I put it online, I documented it, I took screenshots, I made sure it had a tutorial, I tested it. And those things are good to get practice at as much as any other piece like AI or networking code or whatever. So that by the time you're doing it where it matters, it's not your first time trying to go through the finishing process, or that's going to get bound to get also polluted with its own kind of beginner errors.
Sure.
Also, I recommend throwing everything out, but don't actually get rid of it. Like,
Yeah.
Write everything down in pen, and then instead of just don't rip the page out and throw it away, just cross everything out, because then you can go back and look at what you did and be like, oh yeah, we tried that, and there's a reason we crossed it out.
Yeah.
So we're not going to waste time doing it again.
My one regret to not throwing away things better, and this is actually kind of documented in some Kotaku interview from a long time ago or whatever, was like when I did Boomblocks levels for Wii, as a designer, I would like mass produce levels, like 12 a week, and I would shove 2/3 of those into like an archives graveyard and be like, these were not as good, let's not use these. After I left that company, they stuck a bunch of those back in the game, so on the bullet on the box, they'd be like, over 300 levels or whatever. I'm like, no! I should have just burned it to the ground. There's a reason why you hide that stuff that's not as good. Anyway, wasn't like calling me.
So you're the reason why those levels were all terrible, huh?
And the good ones, and the majority of them. There's a lot of talented people on that team, but I'm just saying,
Boomblocks was amazing though. That game is so underrated.
It's Boomblocks in 3D before, what is it, Angry Birds in 3D before Angry Birds was a big deal. But different times.
Yeah.
Wow, you're older than I thought.
I'm slightly a dinosaur. My grades don't show up in this lighting, but yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Someone had a quote, by the way, that I thought you all would appreciate. They were saying that you'll spend the first half of the game jam working on 90% on the first 90% of the game, and the second half of the game jam working on the second 90% of the game.
So I would actually take the first 25% of the game jam and don't write a single thing of code or anything. Just spend seriously a day just thinking about the game and the theme and figuring out what it is, and that's going to make the final 75% a lot easier. If you as soon as you hear the theme, you're like, we got to start building stuff, and then you're like, okay, you figure out the game and you go over there and start working on stuff and you start making content. It's just like it doesn't really come together. But if you all just think about it for longer than you think, to the point where you think that you're wasting too much time.
We actually so we have a super secret web page that you can access if you press the command for theme. There's a super secret web page that is currently password protected. The password being the theme for the jam. It's going to not be password protected in the future. It's just password protected for now. But basically, on that page, I kind of put together a little guide of how to do the design and prototyping process in a jam, just so that it's really important to just kind of slow down and just kind of spend some time kind of sitting with the theme, and don't just be theme is this, so I'm just going to make a game about this. There's a lot of, and I'm hoping that this theme will make everyone very mad. Everyone hates the theme, and I hope that everyone will find lots of wild, wacky interpretations with this theme.
So they can rage against the theme. The one comment I want to put, and I agree to all of those with sort of asterisks, as I often do, and that's that there's people who work different ways, and I know some people in the chat saying fail fast, fail early, etc. Some people think more comfortably by building, kind of in the especially they already have some kind of base comfort with the medium. And I'm partly like this because the kind of games I tend to work on, my research was all in pinball game design, is high-speed, interactive, arcade kind of spaces where the brain's actually a terrible emulator for this kind of thing. The brain, what it thinks is going to be good, turns out to just kind of fall apart. It's not as plannable as a turn-based strategy or other kinds of experiences. And so because of this, even in the pinball realm, they do what's called whitewooding, which is before they've literally painted themselves in a corner, they have an all-white table where they can play a little bit, drill some holes, move the piece, play it a bit, move some holes, drill the thing, just tearing it up before they start really thinking about, okay, here's how we're going to settle it in. And so, processes will differ. The other part that comes from kind of at least our methodology in Gamketo is that the more kind of hands-on experience someone has, the easier it is for them to plan constructively with sort of a grounded thinking about how long these different trade-offs will take or what the different paths forward will entail to make those calls. And so that's where if someone's not quite sure, feeling comfortable how to plan it, again, just sort of mucking around, understanding this is experimental time a little bit early on, can kind of help them feel kind of some footing of, okay, well, this was kind of working. We can at least, plan forward on that as a foundation. But like I said, different strokes, different folks, no one right way to do things. And I basically agree with all things said, just kind of a different personality types.
It's the final minute. Until
Okay,
the theme is announced.
real quick, speed
just
round,
so
last minute. What don't you do in the game jam? What's the worst thing? The worst thing you've ever done in the game jam? Someone in the chat wanted to know. Quick, you have a minute.
All-nighter.
Oh yeah, all-nighter. Yeah.
No all-nighters. Okay, rest.
We
Take
are
care of
big on
yourself.
we are big on self-care in this game jam.
Okay, cool.
I know.
Yeah.
Test the game and make sure it runs before you upload it.
Yes,
That seems
please,
good. Those are good
please
things.
Do this.
As the game didn't
Please.
work.
Yeah. Chris?
Sure. For those of you on teams, not just self-care, but peer care, make sure you are respectful of, patient with, understanding of other people's needs, challenges, hydration, sleep, compromises they need to make to pull it off, etc.
Okay. Belinda, I think you can finish your countdown. I think we actually did this right. Oh, yeah. It's 3 o'clock. Well, I'm Eastern time, so.
Bump.
Yeah. It's 1,200 hours in 24-hour time, so it is.
The countdown, though, is
5.
actually to whatever the delayed.
Yeah, it's true. Don't worry about it.
4.
Three.
We're gonna know the theme for like
2.
Plus
30
7.
2. The pages are really thick, okay? 1.
Dun, 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 dun.
It's that.
Ooh.
Like
Belinda, I'm
bicycle.
very proud of you. I forgot to mention that Discord cameras are mirrored, and you took care of that. That's amazing. All right.
Cycles.
So the theme is cycles. That's awesome.
The theme is cycles, and everyone can now access the theme page. The password is cycles, all lowercase. All lowercase.
All right. So I'm putting the link in chat. So this page is for cycles.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
If you program your game and it takes place over more than one frame, it has cycles in it.
There you go.
Just
All
put it
games
out
are
there.
cycle
Just
based.
do
You're
whatever
done.
you
Safe.
want.
Yeah. How
You're
many
done.
cycles of computation?
Now
Yeah.
what I want to do is make like a bigger version of the bit of Legend of Zelda, of Ocarina of Time rather, where you're trying to go through and get past the guards to get to Zelda, because that's all cycle based, right? That's a cycle.
I just
right?
think-
Little patrol routes.
Yeah, little patrol
Whoever
routes.
puts-
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things about GoldenEye 64 is you could basically
Yeah.
like really feel like James Bond by memorizing those patrol routes and just nailing
Oh, yeah.
headshots as you rush through the space because it's like clockwork.
Yep.
Just whoever uses the bicycle song by Queen just wins.
There you go. That's good. It's great.
Wins, but wins a lawsuit.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
You have to legally get the rights to use bicycle in a game jam game.
Yeah.
That's your entire
That's what
budget.
in the weekend.
The winning part is negotiating with a record agency and
We've all
succeeding
done
at that.
that before.
That'd be
It's
a fun
actually
game.
it's actually just a clicker game where you click to make the bicycle go faster. With bicycle in the background. That's it. That's the whole game.
That's it.
Let's go on. Let's go on break really quickly, just for a couple minutes, so we can get some water and also load up our brainstorming docs. So I will talk with you, Will, about that when we are on break.
We have to do that. Okay, cool, great, awesome. So we're gonna take like I don't know, let's say like a 5-minute break. That seem good?
Yeah. Just
Well-
a 5-minute break.
All right, cool. 5 minutes, and we'll be back. All right,
Cool.
ready, steady, go.
Go.
Friends, welcome back. You have not. Do not adjust your monitor. We have shrunk to prodigious size and are now located in the corner of your screen so that we can give front and center attention to, M Bear. But some days, why M Bear? Is there more than Bear? No, there is not. M just
Can
Bear.
you zoom in on that bear for
Uh,
more screen
I
footage?
will. No, we cannot.
I thought you go to the zoomy with the
Yeah.
stuff in there.
I'm working on. There.
I don't mean to use technical terms, but
I
like,
mean, there's a pretty big bear on the screen. All right, y'all. Okay. So, Belinda,
Team.
please take it away. Cycles.
Cycles. All right. So we're actually going to. I will actually follow the instructions that I left for myself in the form of this page that is now public for everyone to see. So we have a couple steps here on this page. We are going to explore, refine, prototype, create, and then you will also see at the very bottom of this page, we put in all the selected extra credit challenges, which were 100% suggested by the other jammers. earlier this past week. And these are just fun, totally optional, like just goofy extra things you can do with your game to kind of give yourself like some more creative constraints or some more ideas or some more gameplay mechanics to include. So yeah, have fun with those. You don't get extra credit for them. Just extra credit in your soul. Like it's just entirely for like your own pleasure and your own use. So there's that.
Chris has it right.
So yeah, let's start off with kind of exploring. So basically, this would be the time when you just kind of sit with the theme and just maybe make a note of like your first impressions with the theme and maybe write those down, or maybe don't, but just kind of just be mindful of like what your first impressions are, and just be aware that, you know, first impressions aren't necessarily like the best ones, that you might want to kind of sit with it a little bit more. So we kind of, last time I did this with, it was just me and Chris last time, we kind of just wrote down like random ideas that we thought of like in relation to the theme. Like just kind of random things, and then like kind of did some like mind mapping kind of based off of that. Does anyone have any like opinions about this?
Just to sneak in there, my sort of micro personal rationale for that is that I tend to find I write things down not just to remember them, but also to get them off my stack to dig underneath it. So I quit regurgitating in my brain of like, oh, I bet this would be so good if I did something with it. Putting it down so I can then vomit other stuff down and then look at it from a arm's length and be like, 5-6 of these are garbage. To me, that helps me sort of ideate. But again, everyone's process is different. Curious to hear what other y'all think and suggest from your processes.
I over ruminate, which is why I've had a game literally designing in my head for the better part of 3 years, and it's still just in my head because I over ruminate. So, you know, that's a weakness on my part. It's okay. Don't be like me. Yeah.
Is Sam talking? I think his.
I forgot to turn my mic on.
Oh, okay. I was like,
there you go.
He was mute.
But no, I just said 3 years is like nothing, man. Like I have game ideas from when I was like 12.
Yeah, I kicked around a script that I wrote, like a movie script for about a decade. So I figure I got about 7 more years on this game, and then I'll be there. Motorcycles.
So yeah, like yeah.
I was actually thinking like a water cycle game, something kind of like Flower, but for like a water drop, right? Where you like
Jeremy reminded me of the cat meme, the loops thing.
Which there's so many cat memes.
My first thinking goes to. My first thinking goes to, I used to use the Mayan calendar sort of as a form of personal protest against the Gregorian calendar nonsense.
Sure,
but like good. Thinking about like cycles as like seasons or time, or that's also kind of a nice life cycles and so on, kind of a
like Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before, and it will happen again.
Yes.
Something that came up for me was I was watching The Incredibles again, and it reminded me of the dad when he always went to the office and he went through the same cycle every day of like the boring commute kind of thing. So like it's kind of like a Groundhog's Day kind of thing, you know, like Bill Murray's just like, I gotta redo this over
Russian doll,
over.
Perhaps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Micro spoiler.
Bear's gone. Oh, the bear's on the next page. Ooh, okay.
I don't know if y'all did these as kids, but like when there's like a pond at a local park and they have the big old boat things where you paddle and like it cycles in the water with the giant, stupid, hard tubes.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? You can kind of get like ducks around.
Yeah, the paddle boats.
Paddle boats, right? The ones where you like push your feet.
Or is it a boatercycle? I'm just asking the question. I don't want to.
Well, there's
I think what I like about that is it could be like a racing game, but like the lamest racing game imaginable, and you're all going like 2 miles an hour and like furiously paddling to.
Yeah. It's just, you see swans like swim past you in the foreground as you're going.
It's like Red Bull branded.
No, I think that's a pretty good one.
Are we saying cycles as iterations from Karner over in chat? I mean, every game we're working on always has iteration in it. Perhaps the game even releases with different playable versions of like, here was the first thing we tried, here was the next version we tried, for the player to see and navigate those.
For a while, there were.
Did you ever see that movie with Tom Cruise where he keeps dying, like Groundhog Day, over and over again? And like
That's
every time
good.
he dies, he like respawns. So you have to like play. You have to
Oh,
memorize
yeah,
where the like
that's
alien
the-
pops out.
Sci-fi one or whatever, right?
Yeah, it was the movie that was
Yeah.
branded so badly they like changed the name when they released it for
Yeah, it
video.
was called
Yes,
Edge
it
of Tomorrow, but that name was stupid, so they rebranded it to Live, Die, Repeat, which is an amazing title.
Well, it's because the
It does
ads
what it
kept
says
saying
on
those
the
words
tin.
instead of the title of
Well,
the
because
movie.
they were like, well, the book it was based off of was called All You Need Is Kill, which is a great title, and they were like, well, that's
Can't do that.
that's too
Don't wanna
good.
use a good name.
Yeah. I think something like Groundhog Day-ish would be kind of cool, but that sort of plays into the same thing that Josh was talking about earlier with the cyclical grind thing, which
Yeah.
kind of almost feels like Stanley Parable almost.
Well,
Actually,
it could
I
also
have
go
the
kind of the
perfect
direction of like the PB Winterbottom style games, where and Flash games did these things for the next decade, right? Where like you're playing again with your shadow of your previous
Oh
play.
yeah.
And those things are a common
Yeah.
pattern that we've seen a
But
lot of from the
actually, I
industry.
have the perfect game. It's a little Flash game called Every Day the Same Dream. And
Every day the same dream. Okay.
Every
I'm gonna
day
write
the
that
same.
down.
Yeah, and it takes like 5 minutes to play, and you're like a corporate
Oh,
peon, and you
yes.
just repeat the day, and every day you're trying to find something different to do to
Yeah.
like
I
break out of
low-key,
the.
I like this, and I'd love to see
I-
this with the bear that's on our document.
Yeah,
It's just,
and I hear you,
so
but
what does the bear
also,
do every day?
but also, what about a laundry game in which you're
Yeah.
doing cycles of
You're
laundry?
doing cycles of laundry.
And
Yeah, you gotta put the right loads in,
just
kind
the
of
one
thing.
cycle, you gotta like read the tags and separate out the colors. And
One of the things I did at UW, there is a laundry game in it. You have to. you
yeah,
have to
I did
set
a
the
dish
dial
doing game.
correctly,
It was
then
not good.
That's what was I gonna say? I had another good one. Oh, you could go like super hardcore and go like the Krebs cycle, right? For like cellular energy, and do like a learning game, right? About like internal biological cycles.
Like the ATP processing from
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
That's
You
a
could-
word I remember from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Nice. Science.
Science is
Good
cool.
Yeah, well, also, and maybe this is kind of too low-hanging fruit, but like Tron Light Cycles is also like a 30-year tradition in gaming.
I mean, you're not
just
wrong.
Snake, where you're cutting each other
Oh,
off,
that's true. Yeah,
is like
that
the
is completely
Cycles
true.
game
Yep.
that kicked off Cycles in gaming. It
But
puts cycles
with the
on
paddle
map.
boats, and it's just a really slow
Yeah,
version.
the paddle boats. It's terrible. It takes hours to get anywhere. But light boater cycles, we'll call it.
Yeah, boater.
And,
So you could do
I
like
could-
you could do something with like pendulums, right? Because pendulums
Yeah.
have like a cycle. You could do like some
Oh,
kind
that's
of like
true, yeah.
pendulous motion sort of thing.
yeah.
Or like a
or
metronome.
those chaotic pendulum things. We got a pendulum on a pendulum on a pendulum.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, there was a kid's toy, Astro Jacks, right? It's like a kid's, like almost like a kid's rave toy, that where you like it's a chaotic pendulum, but it glows in the dark. So like you just throw the chaotic pendulum around, and it's just like lights everywhere. And
Or
you're just
like do like the Newton's cradle, like. Beep.
yeah, that's good too.
Yeah.
Lots of like physical. There are a lot of like physical analogs here, I think.
Or including these sort of like oscillators sphere. There's the whole what is it called? Game of Life, the John Conway cellular automata simulations, where you can make all kinds of little oscillating cyclical patterns of like this one's a 4-stepper,
yeah.
this one's a 2-stepper, as to whether the autonoma rules cause it to
Ooh.
flicker or
Oh,
strobe or grow and shrink, and
Mhm.
those are
For
real beautiful.
anyone in the audience that's like learning how to code, Conway's Game of Life is actually fairly simple to do, but it's a really good programming practice,
Yeah.
and it's really fun when you get it working.
Yep.
Burls, what are you thinking about? I feel like I haven't heard as much from your thoughts.
Yeah, sorry. I've also been like moderating Discord and whatnot a little
Oh,
bit
thank
during
you.
this time because everyone's crazy. Everyone's having fun with the theme.
It's almost like they've been waiting for weeks to hear about this, and then you
Yeah.
told all of them at exactly the same time, and they all
Yeah.
went bananas.
Like a
And there's a
countdown,
lot going on.
and then gave them 5 minutes to let it really pile up.
Right.
So they can just-
And it's almost like you gave them like an actual countdown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like
Um,
with paper and everything.
Yeah,
Somebody
I'm,
actually wrote in the chat Recycle as well, which I thought was a good spin-off of Cycle. And
yeah,
paper.
yeah. Yeah, like honestly, so like, and part of I think this is like mentioned like a little bit on the page, on like the theme page, but like kind of a little bit part of the inspiration for this theme kind of came from the fact that the jam is exactly 100 hours long, and I started thinking about like time and whatnot,
Oh, interesting.
and thinking about time is kind of what got me into this. But I feel bad for even saying this because now a bunch of people are gonna like look at this and be like, "Oh, so it's supposed to be about time," and I'm like, "No."
All you're
no.
saying is that that's the correct answer, not that they have to do the correct answer. Just that that's the right
You
one
can't
to
even
do
make
if
jokes
they
like
want to
that.
win.
No,
I'm
what
sorry.
you
I'm
can't
kidding.
do
It's not
is
can't
that.
even-
all answers are correct, but some answers are more correct than others.
Exactly. And, yeah.
No, that's not helpful either.
Wait, hold on a
People
sec,
are
wait.
gonna take everything. People are gonna take everything too literally.
So what I'm hearing is,
It's like straightforward.
if I want to build this game jam and win, I need in the next 100
There's
hours.
no winning. There's no winning.
I'm reminded.
There's no winning.
I'm sorry, Belinda. This is just too much. But no. What I was gonna say is,
It's just like I constantly I
It
just
sounds really
constantly get
suspicious when you're
questions.
denying it that much. Like, it's like reverse psychology. Like, no, there's no winning, so everyone doesn't try as hard, so then you can win. I see what you're doing.
all I'm saying is, what I've gotten out of this is I need to make a thing about time and motorcycles all by myself that's incredibly technical, even though I've never programmed before, in 100 hours, and it must be an MMO if I want to win this game
yes,
jam.
that is correct. Yes. You are
Needs to
correct.
be
That is the correct answer.
The first day should be spent finding funding for your studio of 30 industry veterans to use the Unreal Engine to work full time for the remaining period on crunch hours.
Correct. Also-
I gotta stop.
Also, there's one more
Unreal is
person we
for
need.
Scrubs. You should be writing a custom engine already.
In assembly, don't fool around with these waste of time child languages. Right to the engine code, pure processor down to the
Wait,
metal.
hold on a second.
Assembly only.
You were going to use a computer? I was going to chisel the entire thing on stone tablets and then
Yeah.
compile it by having it typewritten onto punch cards and fed through an ENIAC.
I like that. I like the earlier thought of
it's
rain
in
cycles, weather cycles.
Yeah.
No, weather cycles too. Yeah.
What's the name of that? Is that the? I'm gonna screw this up. What's the name of that effect where like Coriolis maybe, where like on a sphere, the
yeah.
weather causes big cycles because of the
Turning
fluid
because of
motion? That makes
yeah,
neat
it's the
shape
Coriolis effect.
shenanigans to go on in Unity. To
Yeah.
Someone mentioned in the chat, they mentioned the game Fluidity that's like an old Nintendo game. That's like
yeah,
control
Or,
the water by tilting the screen, and it's like all
yeah.
about. I think it like teaches you like the water cycle or something.
In Liquid Wars back on old Linux days, those Liquid Wars were awesome. It was like pixels swarming on pixels,
That's cool.
and there's probably some sort of like giving water cycle character, anthropomorphizing it.
That's interesting.
Or those
there
games
somewhere
that
that-
were like quicksand, like out those games.
Ooh.
Like, the sand comes down and then it's like oil, and then you light it on fire.
Games and old movies led me to really suspect quicksand was going to be a situation I'd have to worry about way more often. That like I needed to know you use a stick to help someone out, and like you don't move and you go flat, and like I'm so ready for that and catching on fire. I can stop, drop, and roll, and I can get out of quicksand, and neither's come up, and I'm really.
I actually speaking of like fluidity and whatnot, I remember seeing a while ago. I saw like a reverse hourglass. Like I don't remember how it works or like what the properties in it are, but basically you turn it upside down and everything floats to the top.
You
And
do it. You could do it with like
That was-
very small
that was some-
bubbles in like a fluid that doesn't like allow bubbles to congeal.
Little helium balloons.
Tiny helium balloon. Yeah.
Little helium. Thousands of little individually blown up helium.
Yes, that's it.
Oh,
Must
but-
be done by hand.
Okay, the best toy is the bird that tips.
Yeah,
and
the
drinks
drinky bird.
water.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the
And
Drinky
it's famous through The
bird.
Those are the
Simpsons.
most
Those
amazing.
are good stuff.
Although we're talking about these little cyclical toys. There's also those old. It would be like gel or oil, like going down and turning little wheels, and you could see the
Yeah.
oil things going down the zigzag and piling up. You know what I'm talking about?
Color?
Yeah,
I know what
yeah,
you're talking about.
You know
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking about.
I know,
don't
I don't know. That's fine. I
It's
always
like a little
just turn it
cycle toy.
upside down.
And you can totally simulate that with like collision particles in Unity and just
Just
call it a
make
day.
just make a toy just make a lava lamp simulator and you just watch it.
Yeah.
That's the game.
But you have to program it to an atomic level. That's the hard part of the lava.
Well, the tippy drinky birds they work with thermodynamics. Like you think it
True.
would be some mechanical thing, but it's like nope, just the water evaporates and then it falls back down.
Yeah. Oh, is there some other completely different use of the word cycle that we're ignoring? computing cycle?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So, someone
computing
was
cycle.
talking about making a game in chat about making a game optimizing processor cycles, which
Yeah.
which might actually be kind of interesting. Although this is like a weird tie-in. Last night we were talking about a physical game that one of the guys on Extra Politics is making based on bitcoins, and bitcoins are incredibly cyclic and a hot topic. So if you wanted to do something with
And
that,
waste a lot of cycles.
they do.
Yeah. Like
In
starting
fact,
the
in
nation
fact
of
they
Denmark.
they are the opposite of recycling when it comes to environmental impact.
It's
Correct.
really recycling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin just made me think of like stocks. So you got your stocks going up and down.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
That's true, too, yeah, the
no,
stock
that's
market.
that's
Let's
really
Make
good.
a stockbroker game.
Yeah, let's just put all this money into and invest
someone
into
mentioned-
something. Then at
Someone
the
mentioned
end of
like
the,
game dev cycle, like any
Game
kind
dev
of
cycle.
software development or any kind of game development cycle. Like we do refer to it as a cycle.
Totally,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And there's like sort of the game dev simulator kind of old style games where you're kind of assigning, okay, well, who has cycles on the team right now? Okay, let's put the engineer over on this. Let's move the artist over
Yep.
here. Maybe
Yeah,
a little
it's a-
micromanagement sim.
Yeah, it's like a man. Yeah, I was gonna say it's a management game.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Who's got cycles?
Oh, that reminds me of what's that storyboard process that overlaps with like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
It's
the
like
Cure
this
with a
big
Thousand
circle.
Faces.
Yeah,
No, he's
Hero
talking
of a Thousand
about-
Faces.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you were talking
Journey.
about the ring theory.
No, it was like
CGI.
yeah.
Oh,
It was like, no,
well, there's the
prequels are really
Ouroboros.
good because of the ring theory.
Well, so there's Ouroboros, right? Which is the concept that a story is dedicated to endlessly repeat itself, and it's a snake biting its own tail, right? Like
Yeah,
never-ending
it's the thing from
story.
Never-ending story.
Well,
It's the
okay,
Orin.
so there's two versions, right? Orin is two snakes, and the Ouroboros is one, but same idea.
Yeah.
And then something like that could totally, like, if you didn't want to go into all of like these super, we've been discussing like a lot of super crunchy kind of things, but there's also like the cyclical story, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's like most time travel movies, the ones that don't want to sort of have like split timelines or whatever, where the ending kind of helps set up the beginning kind of thing, which is totally like a narrative explorable space in a Twine game or something.
Yeah.
If someone to write something where it sets, you're causing the events and they're trying to prevent kind of thing.
Time looping, yeah.
Yeah.
Your stable time loop, where
I'm my own
there's
grandpa
no
scenarios.
point where the time loop started.
I actually
Because it's
saw
all-
like a heartbreaking webcomic about a person who was sentient in like a Mario game where you could only run right, and they grew up in a house on the left side of a pit, and they jumped over the pit to the right and realized they could never go back to like see
And
their parents
can't
again.
come with them.
I know
And their
exactly
parents can't
what
come
Oh
back.
yeah,
Right? Yeah. And then the last panel is that person deciding that they're going to settle down, and they continue to walk right for a while, and then they come to a pit and they realize that they're going to stop and set up a house there, and they're going to grow old there.
I
And-
hear you in your meaningful Jason Rower type games, but also what about disco balls with cycle? Just putting it out there.
I hear you
saw
with your
the-
deep philosophy, but also shiny lights.
Well, I saw the Let's Do the Time Warp thing, and I'm picturing dancing, and I'm like, oh, there's all kinds of cycles on the lights, laser shows, and the floor lights, and yeah.
You
Disco
could,
balls and lasers.
yeah,
Or what
there
if
you
it's
go.
like a DDR game where the music is like a really short, terrible loop, like Donkey Kong style music, but it gets faster and faster. So the cycles, the music is like it's endless. It's like an arcade.
Yeah.
You fail when you can't keep up, kind of thing.
Can we just put a video of the campfire song from SpongeBob?
I hate that I both know exactly what you're talking about and have it stuck in my head now and will not be able to remove it for several days.
This is
Well,
the
that was
song
for
that
you.
never ends.
Yeah. Oh, someone said that they should make a game about Wagner's ring cycle. That's a good plan. I like that. It's good. Don't do that.
That's a small, easily achievable scope. You know?
Yeah,
It's just
it's good.
a little story.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's not that foundational or anything. It's pretty short. You could read it in 4 days.
Somebody put in a toilet simulator, and that reminds me of when you flush a toilet and it goes in a cycle down the hole. It's just like some random thing that just popped in.
Yeah.
Which, due to the Coriolis effect, I believe depends on which part of the globe you're on as
Correct.
to which way it might swirl.
Yeah, it's correct.
Ooh, yeah. Swirls, yeah.
And if you're at the equator, it just can't. Not science. Yeah, so other uses of the word cycle. Recycle, decycle. Life cycle.
Yeah, like life cycle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like the different generations of a family or something like
Yeah,
that.
the generations, if it's some of those little kind of evolution, kind of like multi-generational.
Rogue Legacy.
Yeah, kind of thing.
Like Rogue Legacy. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or also
Someone brought
those, I can't remember what they're called, when they do little physics simulations to try to like force evolve a walker using physics simulations by rejecting the ones that seem to like locomote the best.
Yeah, you could do like you could do like a machine learning thing. Okay. Yeah, you could do like a machine learning thing where
Genetic
you make
algorithm kind of stuff.
where you make like a super simple game, right? And then the game is to get an AI to play the game as fast as possible, and you can like invest different things in making the AI better at like solving complex problems. You could do something like that. That's probably more than you could do in 4 days, but I think there's merit in that.
I was like, this sounds like a PhD project. I mean, like,
well, like,
it's a good
one. Yeah, just like variable control of something in a cyclical nature, right? So like we're doing the same thing over and over again, and the game is fundamentally that we're changing the parameters slightly every time.
So one of the nice things that used to emerge when there used to be like one-button jams is real common, especially when touchscreens were new and fidelity was garbage. Was like these games where basically your only control, right, was the thing would keeps turning, and you'd have to like hold down to move forward, or you'd hold down to fire, and it was like a one-button interaction because it's always moving in a cycle. It's kind of another kind of nice arcadey, easy way to kind of grapple into this kind of space.
Yep.
Asteroids, but the ship is just constantly spinning, and all you can do is push, go, or fire. What are people gravitating towards out of the various vomit we've now spilled out in front of us as a group?
I mean,
I really like the idea of like a game that repeats. So you do one really small thing, but you do it multiple times, slightly differently every time.
I kind of like the hero's journey idea, where like that's we could make a lot of things into the hero's journey, right? But like that being a theme, I think would both would be reinforced by the mechanics that we're describing, like repeatedly.
Yeah, and I think a neat way to do that was I just saw on Twitter like someone did a neat cut over a weekend of like all 10 Star Wars movies crammed together into one video trailer.
Yeah,
it's super awesome.
It's like the 5-minute cut.
But precisely because it shows like the student becoming the master that trained the person, like that sort of cycle could play nicely into the thing of it ends by being the teacher that you met at the beginning or whatever kind of deal.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool too. Yeah, I love those ones. I also love the random disco ball and the boater cycles.
These are all things that could be in the same game, I'm just saying. You earn bonus points if you...
So like you initially meet a mentor who helps you motorcycle with a disco ball, and then you become the mentor from winning the race. But it takes hours, and the race is very short.
A buddy of mine made a game once called Duck, and it starts off the screen. There's just an egg, and you push the buttons, and it goes, and then it's a duck, and you just walk forward. And it's kind of like a parody of Jason Rohr's Passage game. And then you find like a lady duck, and then you have little ducklings, and you have to cross the street, and then it loops back to that nest originally, and then the duck family goes off, and then there's an egg, and then the game just starts itself over again.
Yeah, kind of like these little kind of one-off title is the joke games. You have to burn the rope was a kind of IGF finals like a decade ago of like, what are you doing? You burn the rope and then it's over.
I played that like a week ago.
You have to burn the rope is a great game.
And it's a fine example of just doing a polished, simple thing.
Yeah, it is better to do a simple thing well than a complex thing poorly.
I kind of want to move over to the Trello.
Sure. Let's
now. So we can get rid of these if we want. Basically, do we want to maybe write down like basically like our best ones here?
So probably not sandwiches or fries. That was about the old image I had applied.
Mm-hmm.
I typed in cycles, and that was the first image that I could find, so I made that the background.
It seems like a good one.
That's the first thing that came up.
I kind of classifying. Wait, this isn't art. This is art or aesthetic. I kind of like classifying like different kind of different ideas into like what kind of like I associate them with. Like if something feels more like, oh, this is like an aesthetic choice, as opposed to like, oh, this like feels more like a mechanic that could be like used. Not that it can't be both. Like it could be both. I just kind of like, yeah.
I really like motorcycles. I think there's a nice opportunity for some buoyancy. I think the assets don't seem that complex. I think it's an undercapitalized space. There's a whole niche market that's not being reached by existing racing franchises.
I could see this like really simple but gorgeous. It's like a It's a motorcycle game where you just go left to right, and like you just go to the next screen, then it's like something else, or it's the same exact thing. You just go through all these
Well,
different.
no, and then the same duck or swan needs to swim by you over and over again, or circle you while you're motorcycling.
What we do, we make it like Atari or like NES graphics, and it's just you're going from left to right, and it's just different screens, and it scrolls like Mega Man style,
So,
kind of.
yeah.
And there's just different things, and you're just going down the river in your motorcycle.
My grad advisory in Bogos had a like IGF finalist slow year that was basically like sit there and watch the logs go on an Atari game, because it's just very peaceful and zen-like, and like there were seasons, and yeah, it is like maybe the whole point is like, hey, you're just paddling a boat, calm it down, people, like
Yeah.
just enjoy the setting,
Yeah.
kind of a.
Just make all the backgrounds be super metaphorical about time and stuff.
Yeah,
Or disco ball.
Before I drag us too far down the my nonsense with motorcycles, though, are there any other things that people actually seriously were like, oh, but what about this other thing that like was not a joke?
Nope. I think we're all too far. You've overdone your sarcastic quippiness. We're all convinced. We're all on board the motorcycle. We'll even paddle it with you.
Oh, you know what? Actually, so here, right, there are co-op motorcycles where you both can paddle, and that's like part of the experience, like a local multiplayer. We have to paddle.
It could be local, and you just gotta paddle it.
Network it, so like anybody, like as more people join, the larger.
Please don't do network code and afford it.
There's like 25 people paddling the one boat.
Oh, I think
that code is easy, right? Though it's fine.
I think you're referring to motorcycle.io. I believe is the.
That's what we're doing.
The battle royale.
I think we just figured out.
Boater royale.
Oh God! Stop! Stop! My face hurts.
All right. Can we actually start? Should we? Burls, would you like? Do you want to start trying to actually schedule some things that are more concrete?
Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking about as soon as you mentioned like battle royale, I was thinking about like the kind of like the gameplay loop of that, and one of the most annoying things about battle royale games is that you often spend more time waiting to get into a game than you do actually playing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about that waiting space, so I got kind of hung up on that like right now, and I was like, that waiting space could be used as like a game thing or something.
Yeah, there's very much this sort of cycles of like waiting for like how many more minutes do I sit in this lobby before I get to play this game that I have like only 20 minutes on my lunch break to fit in or whatever.
Right. So we call them gameplay loops, right? But like gameplay cycles are like a big part of that, and like drilling in on the least desirable part of the gameplay cycle is kind of an interesting take. Right? It's very meta. I'm big on the meta things. It's like a big thing for me. So.
Well, the patent, we can now do mini games on the loading screen. That patent expired a couple years ago.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad.
Motorcycling while you're waiting to get into your Fortnite match.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna make so many Fortnite dollars.
So many.
Part of me really and I love this point that you brought up that kind of reminded me of the slow year of just really embracing that, like, hey, people don't race motorcycles, and calling it that as if that's what they're really called. And that's fine. Like, maybe it's just an opportunity to play with water shaders and play with sky representations and like trying to make a nice little park. You got a motorcycle in the water, and the gameplay is like, look, you're in a motorcycle. Chill out. Just
you can make the water like a lava lamp kind of thing. So you're like floating on this like really rad visual aesthetic kind of thing.
But then every minute you die, and you have to figure out why you keep dying and coming back to life. No, I'm
what?
I was trying to weave it into something else.
Trying to weave it all into one thing.
I was like in a like calm, peaceful.
He's trying to get out of it, but we're making him own it.
Yeah. No.
The last time you die, you wake up in a disco, and there's a.
No.
You wake up in a disco. You just go through every line of the list.
Well,
no.
You're paddle boating down the river, and every single screen is a new thing, so we can put every single idea in a new screen.
Right, and then it turns out that you're actually in hell, and it's the cycle of reincarnation.
Oh, I was gonna say it's like a
morality
Willy Wonka scene when they go through the tunnel and they just that weird stuff. Yeah.
Yes, the danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they surely aren't showing any sign of slowing.
Okay, so let's see. So I'll just throw it in there some possible things to start prototyping, exploring, content-wise, whatever. Motorcycle experience 1 might be like Zen chill out.
Yeah.
right? Motorcycle Experience 2 might be like, hey, is there like an absurdist racing game which is just sort of bafflingly slow? Is there this sort of surreal Willy Wonka terror tunnel
Yeah. Yeah, I'm about
.com going on?
that. Terror tunnels.
And it might depend on the artists on the team or the people involved who are comfortable in the visuals as to which style they really feel some ownership in and like are interested in practicing. If they want to go crazy with the cheese whiz on shaders or like on photoreal environmental trees, or just like, hey, ditch that. Let's make some flat blue water and make a racing game because mechanically it's dirt simple to make a slow racer.
Yeah. Because you don't have to worry about realistic collisions because the realistic collision is thump. That's it. That's all there is.
Oh, wait, no, hold on. There's a whole thing I didn't realize.
Oh gosh. Here we go again.
Get right into it, yes.
Get ready to pivot abruptly to a new thing.
Right? Here we go. Or like Destruction Derby style, where you're trying to knock other people off of their motorcycles. Combat Zone. Last motorcycle standing. But part of what's great is that they are so ineffective, they just kind of grind and bump on each other and make these awful noises.
Well, like,
anything.
A racing game where like everyone goes like a quarter mile an hour.
Yeah.
Or like Destruction Derby where you're just like Lance, like jousting.
Yeah.
Slowly.
Then when you hit, then you see them both like slowly drift in the distance in the water. Like,
No.
You can make the controls like QWOP. Like you have to push the buttons exactly how you would paddle a boat and make it really difficult.
Except we need to make at least one situation in which, for no inexplicable reason, like if two boats are moving at exactly the same speed and they're going exactly in the right orientation, they explode for no reason.
So wait,
like an Easter egg.
So, sometimes a game which is mechanically like, it's okay, so if let's take a story on it, someone gets excited. So maybe you're like having to race your motorcycle to inform the president's security that there's a threat coming to their family, and your only way to get there is through your motorcycle.
Wait, hold on a second. Are you a bad enough dude to do this?
And your cell phone fell in the water off your motorcycle, and so you're trying to...
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, I think that's hilarious, and I would totally play that.
Yeah, that's great. Like something with a super serious concept that we take super seriously, like a super serious, like high concept, but then has like this problem of the only way to get there is on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like it's super serious. It's like gritty and war torn and post apocalyptic, and like everything is dark and brooding, and like it's like Mad Max but with paddle boats.
Or so I also like this. So let's say Motorcycle Experience 6 Tugboat Motorcycle Edition, where a ferry, just inspired by our background art, is stuck, and you've got to try to work it free with your motorcycle, just paddling your hardest, just trying to move an aircraft carrier that's like stuck on sand.
Heavy.
Maybe you could even do like count how far everyone in the world who's played the game has gotten the aircraft carrier, and like tally it up, because like you could do like a really simple phone home, right? Like super dead simple. Like when done, report this number to this place, and like someone could hack it and that would be fine. We wouldn't care because it's a silly game. But like you could show how many people had like helped do the tugboat thing, and you could
so
make
it's like ticking a counter in a shared database.
Yeah. That's all it's doing.
How far you've dragged this like airplane that's like half underwater.
Right. And like then we'd only have to animate like that airplane moving. Like there's one screen. The whole game is one screen. And it's how long you can stick with paddling, right?
So it's literally cookie clicker, but instead of clicking the cookie, you're paddling the boat.
Well, I wouldn't say that. But yes.
But yeah.
Okay, so that actually reminds me too of like the movie, the movie Speed, where like if it goes under a certain speed, it explodes. But it's a motorcycle, and so you can't quit the game because if you take your hands off those keys you're pumping, your motorcycle explodes. And so you have to just keep going.
The game starts off, it's like
forever.
You're a bad enough dude to paddle boat to the president, and then it's basically paddle boat speed.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna throw that one under the inform the president security one. I think that's a nice tie-in there.
Yeah, it's good.
Bad dude's intro. Are there any other directions we want to even like?
I
someone,
think I think there's no point at this point. Like, obviously.
No, there really isn't. Also, the stream technically does end in about 15 minutes.
Whoa!
Well,
All
if only we could ask the person who was on after you if that was okay. And let me ask myself. Yes, Belinda, we started late. We can go as long as we like. As long as we're here until you tell us to knock off the nonsense.
I've got a work call in 15, but you know, y'all can run on without me.
Yeah, it's like the Speed movie, except instead of
motorcycles.
Motorcycles.
Although I'm gonna throw out there one other question. So what would really a next gen motorcycle be? Like, what would really capitalize on the power of the latest multi-core platforms or quantum computers?
That sounds like an overscoping thing, Chris.
Good catch. Well done.
Wipeout, but with motorcycles, and they just have all this crazy visual graphics and everything for just.
It's exactly.
Really,
oh, you know, it'd be great.
Really
have,
pumping techno soundtrack.
Your motorcycle is like a super futuristic motorcycle with like this crazy techno babble jargon, but it still moves at like a quarter mile an hour.
Yeah.
You still have to paddle it.
It's the latest in warp drive technology. We can now go 0.3 miles per hour.
It's one manpower warp core motorcycle.
Yeah, so warp core. So picture like a Star Trek shuttle, but it's really a space motorcycle. And so you've got to try to get from your space station back to the other space station.
You know what would be
like
amazing?
300 miles of space between them.
You are Spock on the warp core motorcycle, and you have to get back to the Enterprise, and it's about 300 miles away.
Yes.
I feel like all of these are just turning into Desert Bus, and I feel like I'm okay with that.
Oh no! We're just gonna. Desert Bus the sequel?
We're
just making
Desert Bus 2 Motorcycle Boogaloo.
Oh, actually, so another take on the here. We had our Twisted Metal Destruction Derby, but maybe kind of like a road rash flavor, where you're like beating people on the other ones by punching to the side, and now it's a genuine combat experience.
Chris, I have a serious objection to this. It's boat rash. Thank you.
All right.
Desert motorcycle. Desert. No,
boat
it's
rash.
not.
Fury Creek.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh,
so out of these, which one are people kind of most drawn to? Should actually okay, which can we shove to the bottom of the stack? Which should rise to the top of actually 1, 2, or 3?
So I think we could sort of tier it. Right? So we have the super simple idea of we need to get a motorcycle. We need a model for a motorcycle, and we need to go in at least one direction. Okay?
I think it should be a 2D sprite game. I think it should be a paddle boat with a 2-frame animation.
Yeah. Something super simple. And then we can actually add stuff onto it. Why are they going? Who knows? We'll figure that out once we have a boat that moves from left to right. And then go from there.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but we'll get there very slowly.
Right. And we'll not so much cross over the bridge as under the bridge.
That's true. Yeah. But right there already, so you're right. I like you nailed that. You're hey, no matter what, we need a boat asset. But one of the questions is, do we want a 2D or 3D boat? And that feels like, depending on our team we're putting together, I might put it out to okay, well, who's making the boat? Who's kind of our art-interested person? And which one are they more comfortable with? Because we kind of roll with either of these.
Yep. And then we sort of tier it, right? After that, we have a boat, it moves. Cool. Well, what else does it do? Well, you can punch people. Awesome. We've just made and then the punch people could be a fun thing, or it could be a core gameplay mechanic if we have time, right? So
I feel like we were kind of, it seemed to me like we were kind of it seemed like we were kind of gravitating around the idea of the speed of the boat, making a difference. So I'm just gonna put that in the gameplay where it's it felt like that was a thing we were kind of gravitating towards too earlier.
Yeah, and I think we all sort of also agreed that one of the core gameplay things is it needs to be an amusing control mechanism. It needs to not just be hold down. It needs to be I think Sam suggested QWOP style, funny keys, or some kind of randomized non-standard key combination. You need to press G and P to pedal. right?
Yeah.
Maybe you
Right,
need to
right.
type
I was
out
thinking, like-
motorcycle. You know,
Oh,
typing
yeah!
games, typing games, typing games.
Yeah, it's a typing game.
So yeah,
Where you
something
have
I've
to
been.
type the words that appear, the sentences. It's always like really weird sentences.
Oh,
Remember,
yeah,
like Mario
oh,
teaches typing. Remember, like Mario teaches typing.
I
Like
loved
they
Mario
have like the
Teaches
underwater
Typing.
level. They have like the underwater level that I remember.
So hear
And
me
that's
out.
made me think of the motorcycle.
It's a twine game, but it's a motorcycle twine game, and so you're making decisions about like paddle left paddle, right paddle. And then based on that, it's like, oh no, that paddle was already down, so you don't move. And you have you're faced with a new decision. Which
This is
paddle-
deconstructing the
Yeah.
actual problem.
And
Like
Also, thank you for bringing up like the twine example, because even if our hypothetical team doesn't make this hypothetical game, like the gameplay should still make sense, even if we made this as a twine game versus a Unity game versus like a tabletop game. Like it should
Yeah.
Totally.
like we could like it should be able to kind of pass that test. Like you could make it work in different mediums.
Yeah,
So thank
for
you
sure.
for mentioning that as an example.
one thing I've just been sort of jotting here is like, so different directions we might prototype, they have different needs production wise as to like one, so for in space we don't need water at all, we need space assets, whatever. I've just been jotting little checklist things as to like, okay, what would be different if we did that one versus this one? Because like we say, like punch, well, a certain direction of these would use the punching, others wouldn't need it at all. And sometimes it's just production wise can help inform like, okay, is there some overlap? Can we get some more bang for our buck? Where if we just add this one mechanic, oh heck, we use that paddling mechanism for any of these. Let's prioritize that on the forefront while we still kind of tinker away on the side of our little
Yeah.
micro branch experimentations.
Yep. Also, on our needs list, we need a giant whiteboard so we can come up with as many motorcycle puns for names for this game as possible. It's important. The one that makes all of us facepalm simultaneously is the name of the game. Look, I don't make the rules. I'm just reporting them here to you all. So, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, game names.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one with the president can potentially get really political, which we
Yeah.
may not want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, depending on situation. But maybe we do want to. Maybe we want to make it a news game.
Maybe.
Well,
I was thinking if we did the
a specific president, you just say the president.
Yeah, or it's like a future scenario.
Or it's like a
It's a
past
robo
scenario. It's a
30-30
past
or
scenario.
something.
I mean,
Like,
rescuing the president is a pretty timeless
yeah,
I mean-
trope.
Yeah.
1800s.
Or if you go back in time, like before presidents, and you've got to inform the king's security detail about.
No, the pharaoh. The motorcycle is Egyptian. It's an
You're a time traveling motorcyclist.
No,
Time
Yes.
traveling motorcycle.
It's like Back to the Future, but with a motorcycle.
It's like that stupid hot tub
3
movie
miles
that
an
no one should
hour.
watch.
This is where now we start talking about the business model because we start selling the theme DLC. So
You have to go over 0.88 miles per hour in order to time shift. With your
Oh,
flux
you know,
capacitor
that's
equipped.
funny. Okay, so what if, because like you know
Someone drives a
how like
motorcycle off a
Pokemon
waterfall.
Go, you know how in like Pokemon Go, like if you are going in a car like above 25 miles per hour, like it will be like no,
Oh, yeah,
like
it's like,
it
please
will be
stop.
like
Yeah.
oh, like you can't like actually play it. So what if like, what if the game could only run if you were in a vehicle that was moving like at least like 10 miles an hour or something like
GPS integration for a mobile
Yeah,
game.
so
You
GPS
have to.
updates don't move by 10 meters per tick. You.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say if you start your boat going too fast, a pop up in the game says moving too fast, and it forces you to slow
Well,
down.
it's like a water park person like blows a whistle at you and is like, slow it down, keep it safe. Like, look at the safety sign.
Well, then you can make it a stealth game because you can have you're going this way and you've got the lifeguard and you can.
We
see
didn't
where
even
he's
have.
up and
we
then you
didn't-
paddle past him real fast.
Yeah, we didn't even have the Metal Gear Solid stealth game.
So someone wanted to know. So can I claim planets and build my house after collecting materials on the planet and fight other motorcycles to the death in this awesome MMO zombie survival battle royale in space on boats? Yes,
Probably.
Yes, you can. That's
That
actually what
sounds
this is.
pretty manageable, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like that's really more like 3 days. We might not be
if anything,
reaching
it's probably
far
too
enough.
modest.
Oh yeah,
right.
actually, someone else in chat said a game that's somehow controlled via an exercise bike. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like an
Definitely-
alt control game.
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, if anyone has gameplay ideas that involve like the real world, like absolutely,
Somebody,
like go for that. Put that in
Yeah.
your game.
Somebody actually used an exercise machine, and it was interesting because they used it. This was at Bit Bash Chicago this year recently, And the higher level you got within the game, or the higher score, the tougher the actual exercise machine got, which is a cool progression.
That's really cool. Yeah.
So you're like, oh man, I like actually put in sweat into
You're
this,
gonna
which is
get
like cool.
swole whether you like it or not.
So one of the tricks for this, like in '06, I used to work on some like temporary arcade cabinet style experiences, and one of the things we figured out was that if you just take like a mouse and put it up against something, you can do all kinds of shenanigans based on like tracking a wheel turning in front of it, based on tracking a board sliding in front of it, on like all kinds of stuff just by literally sticking a mouse on something. Otherwise, you can disassemble joysticks and connect their potentiometers to twisting swivel chairs, all kinds of cool stuff that really don't involve like electrical engineering knowledge so much as take the knob that turns and stick it on something that turns kind of deal.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like a mouse, like an animal, and I started thinking of like running in an exercise, like a mouse wheel.
So, someone,
tiniest motorcycle in the world with a little mouse.
I actually saw someone
It's
in
like-
chat suggesting that they were gonna build an entire game about hamster-powered mechs, and I am so here for that.
That's
like,
amazing.
Like the
What's
way you
amazing
stop
about
the
this
mech is you distract the hamster or jostle the wheel loose in its giant chest cavity. Like there's just like a hamster running in a wheel inside the chest of a Gundam, and you're just like, ah.
I think my two hopes there are that one, that it's powered by running in the little wheel. And
Yeah,
that
obviously.
two, that the mech is full human size, like building skyscraper size, not like a little micro mech. I'm really
No.
hoping for like some
One hamster,
42
whole
meter.
mech. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Ooh, one
We're
hamster.
talking like a city
Get that
size
BAFTA
Gundam,
license.
and you just open up the engine core, and it's a single hamster running in the wheel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Simple as that.
So okay, so
He's running in the wheel. That's how it's generating power.
That'd be
Not-
funny. It's like it's a big pan out of like Megazords fighting or something. Then it just zooms in and you just see the hamster game just literally running.
One of them freezes. They're all tuckered out. They go over, get a drink of water from the wheel, come back in the wheel, and keep running.
Or you do like a big city rampage game, but you're just a gigantic hamster in a hamster.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be a good one too.
Yeah.
It's like when the hamster goes through that Mario level thing that person made or whatever.
and so out
Like
of
that
these,
Psychonauts level where you destroy the city, but you're a hamster.
yeah, so these various things I've been trying to stick in there. Again, sort of like each one of these Trello cards with its checklists are the things that are different to it, and that's where, depending really on who was on the team, as to like some of these would really leverage additional code talent or environmental art, comfort or proficiency, as well as of course the styles people want to do.
Yep.
And so that's where I think really pragmatically on a team I would be figuring out what to build based on who's here, what do they want to do, and then driving it based off that. Since at the end of the day, it's more about are we practicing what we want to practice or putting a portfolio what we find interesting to do and playing to our strengths.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. We should definitely like I'm not a huge coder person, but I can help out with like I'm really comfortable with Twine and like making things work out in Twine. So like I have a personal preference for Twine, but also like I can also like do like some art. It's very like silly, like kind of abstract art, but like if that was like an art style we wanted to go with, like I can also do that.
So
kind
yeah,
of thing.
silly abstract might be a great match for the Willy Wonka terror tunnel, where we just want some like ridiculous creatures popping up and strange and abstract stuff happening to the person. Yeah, it's maybe it's in a world where motorcycling is the drug, and like through motorcycling we hallucinate, we build an addiction, and we want to stop but we can't. You know?
Maybe
last motorcycle. I can't go anymore.
Maybe this is a story about revenge. Maybe our father fell off a motorcycle when we were young, and we swore one day that we would master the ancient art of motorcycling.
We're overcoming it.
And revenge.
It like opens like a training montage, like Rocky, but it's like pedaling and then like sitting next to the water and pretending to kind of like
or just like
in the boat.
Or like the running thing in Punch Out, except Doc, instead of being on the same level as you, is running beside the river, and Little Mac's in the boat in the river.
He's training to be a kickboxer, and this is like
Doc
the preparation.
At a very slow, saunterly pace as you boat alongside him.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is gold. Yeah, this is it. This is the whole game.
Yeah. Chris, I want to make sure that you are able to go on to your next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just feel free to leave. Does anyone else need to also leave at 1?
I have to leave like around 1-ish. So
yeah.
Okay.
So let's wrap up.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Good job, everyone. We did it.
Yeah, we did it.
Yes.
Hey!
Belinda.
This was definitely like a lot sillier than the last one we did, which was just me and Chris. And then having more people. This is exactly why you don't want to have the team be too big, because when the team is too big, then you will start going into motorcycles on motorcycles on motorcycles.
When it was
That sounds like the opposite of a problem.
Well, when it was just you and me, I could talk myself down from it. But with these other three here, they were like, "No, we're doing motorcycles. Go with it." And then
Also-
So we called your bluff. You're like, "Oh, motorcycles, that's dumb," and we're like, "Oh yeah."
Is it dumb?
But what
By the
about the
way-
non-motorcycle ideas? No, boo.
We're gonna do epicyclic chaotic motorcycles on motorcycles, where each motorcycle is actually wielding a motorcycle on its own paddle wheel that is smaller
It's
than it.
motorcycles all the way
It's
down.
motorcycles all the way down.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's recursive cycles.
There you
Wait,
go.
is that like a John Green reference? Did you just make a John Green reference?
Yeah, it's
That's a
turtles all the way.
reference.
Okay, all right. I was like,
Yeah.
That was like a multi-tiered reference.
yes.
It was pretty good.
Cyclical, even.
Yeah,
See?
it was pretty good.
It's not, but
It all comes back where we started, to the mighty motorcycle.
right.
Oh, friends.
Actually, wait. Yeah, I will say. Hold on, bros. Is the theme cycles plural or singular?
It's cycles as in
Plural.
C
Plural.
Y C C
Oh,
C
no.
Y C L E S.
Then immediately,
Like-
several of these ideas have only one motorcycle and have to be discarded instantly in favor of the ones that have multiple motorcycles, or else we
Please.
violated the
You
theme.
could have a
And that's how
motorcycle
games
that
work.
slowly
Don't,
sucks, and you have to jump on it.
please.
Sorry, but the fun ones with one motorcycle are out. We have to do on multiple motorcycles. because
Has to be
the theme
multiplayer.
has an S on it.
Quick, someone
It's
get
the law.
building
I
that
don't
code.
make the law. I'm just a cop.
All right.
I don't get to. Anyway,
My
I
face
gotta jet.
literally hurts.
All
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Happy motorcycling.